everybody. Welcome to this session with Alison Maclean. My name's Philippa Campbell. I'm honoured to be here to guide us through a bit of a conversation. And thank you all for coming. I've asked Alison's permission not to go through a biographical note presenting her, but just briefly, and you can check out the stuff in your little Bible for the weekend in terms of the speakers. I think for all of you, if you haven't seen Kinch's Sink, that's something you have to do when you go home this evening. It's available to look at online. And to sort of jump to now that we're all kind of astounded that Alison is actually with us today, because she hasn't yet completed shooting The Rehearsal, which is her latest film. And she's got 4 more days to go, and she's at work at 5:30, 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So this is someone in the middle, well, you know, kind of in a process, coming to the end of the shoot, looking at a little break, and then, you know, her cut. And so you really are in the presence of a working filmmaker working. So that's kind of special. So for this afternoon, we're joining you in your bubble a little bit. And there's a couple of things. The sort of theme of the weekend is very much around collaboration, so we'll talk a little bit about that. And also I've got a couple of other things, and we'll try and have lots of questions. And as we go through, if there's something you want to ask, just indicate, and we're very happy to make it quite interactive. And then we'll put some time aside at the end for sort of big body of questions as well, so you can have a bit of a think about what Alison says and respond. Sounds go good. Into it. All right?
Yeah.
Okay, so just because I didn't quite know where to start, I started in 2 places. I went to the dictionary, because I'm one of these people that does still like dictionaries, to kind of ground me and to ground our conversation a little bit. And we're going to start a little bit consecutively around your work. But we will at some point just skip to the rehearsal. But we won't start with the rehearsal in terms of Alison's work as a filmmaker. And my dictionary gave me 2 definitions of collaboration. One was working together for a common goal, and the other was cooperating treasonably with an enemy, which I thought was kind of...
Oh, I like that one.
And I kind of think I felt both those things in this process. So between those 2 fields, we'll see how that one goes.
Okay, I like that.
Alison, just to start with you, before you became a filmmaker, when you worked on Strata, that was your first experience. And I've sort of looked at the thing in New Zealand, on the little interview that you did about that, which is online. And you talk about going from art school and working with this really interesting group of people. You were studying sculpture. You had a sense of connection with the work. And then you went and made your first film, which was all by yourself. So you collaborated with yourself as an artist in that first thing. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I did it in the sculpture department at Elam, and I went to them and said that I wanted to make a film which is a bit irregular in sculpture, and they were not very keen, I would say, but they did have some basic equipment, and so, but they said the conditions were that I had to kind of do everything myself, so then I borrowed a Bolex from the, university, and Leon Narby showed me how to kind of load it, and so I sort of did all the different parts of it, of editing it and shooting it, and music and everything, and I mean that worked out. I learned a lot. I processed it as well myself for a while, like rehearsal, black and white film, and then in some ways, it didn't work out so well, because it's hard to do things on your own.
Yeah.
So I guess that was.
Oh, we don't have one. Sorry. So we just. So
I need to speak a little louder.
If you could speak a little louder.
Okay. I will try and do that. Yeah.
Project.
Yes. I'll try and project.
Yeah. So you did go the whole way with yourself making that first film, and then with So I'm going to skip from that to kitchen sink, where you've said the right people came along and they excelled themselves. I love that, because that seems to me to be something that, well, it's a position that I would love to be in every time I'm involved in a working process.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you always hope for that. You always hope. I mean, that was a film, I would say, that was, it felt charmed. It felt like this kind of synchronicity of, yeah, like people coming together and everything being better than I imagined, and it feeling like a charmed process. And so then you think, well, that's how it's going to be, and then it often isn't. And, you know, I would say there are just some unique times in my working life where that's been the case, and that was one, and I feel that the rehearsal is another, and I feel that's true of a short I made called The Professor, but those are kind of exceptions, you know, it doesn't always happen. So when it happens, you know, you don't take it for granted. I'm very grateful when that, you know, that coming together of sort of just chance and like-minded people and people who are, you know, making the same film, and, you know, it's just a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Just going back to the kitchen sink, which is quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about the magic and alchemy and coming together, but there's a lot of work that goes into bringing things together.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, can you think of some clever things that you did as the connector person, bringing those people together, or do you really think it was a case of being part of a community with other artists and other like-minded people? There was that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core, you know, I think that the kind of core team of kind of the producer and the director and, you know, the writer, or the people who are just sort of central to getting a project going. I mean, that was working with Bridget and also with Trevor, and I mean, that's who I'm working with again as producers. So I think that a lot comes from that, because there is obviously a level of trust, and there's a kind of comfort and just a feeling that you can take risks together and that you make your choices together. So I mean, I think that's really central. I don't think I've ever had a good experience when, you know, it wasn't that close connection with a producer. You know, sometimes it will go off the rails if it isn't that, you know, obviously. So I think that's really central.
Yeah.
And if one of those pieces is problematic, then I think then it affects everything, and everything else just kind of flows from that.
How did you choose your producers back then?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's so much chance in a way. I think it's, you know, I met Bridget on Strata, and we became friends, and then it just seemed like a natural thing that I would ask her to produce, you know, Red's Wife, and then we just sort of went from there. And so obviously we made 3 films together, but then that hasn't been the case, you know, in the States. I mean, I can't say that I have a producer that I've, you know, had an ongoing relationship with, except on commercials. There's a couple that I've worked with many times, but I don't know that I have that person there that I would just automatically make a film with, which is partly why I wanted to come back and work in New Zealand and work with Bridget again.
Yeah. And I mean, when we were sort of talking beforehand, you talked a little bit about Jesus' Son and how that wasn't a collaborative process that filled you up. I think it's a fantastic film, and I love film, but sometimes hard times and difficulty. Yeah,
it was a very traumatic film, actually. It was a very traumatic process, and
Why?
It's sort of a long story. I mean, it was the producers and I had a very close. The producers were also writers, which is an unusual combination, and it was a very close and even joyful process when we were developing the script in the early stages of the pre-production. But then it became very, very difficult because it was financed by the producer's husband and his family, and you know, it was overly long, and they didn't want to cut anything, and then we were just like shooting too much every day and doing like sometimes 15, 16-hour days, and so at some point they start to hate you a little bit, you know, for, you know, and it's just sort of a process that happened, and by the end we were, you know, not even really talking, and the edit was even worse. So yeah, it was very, very difficult, and I actually thought that I might have the film might be taken away from me. So I was just saying to Philippa before, like the difference between that experience and the way I feel now towards the end of the shoot is sort of night and day. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, contrast.
Yeah, very, very.
Makes for an interesting life.
Yeah.
When you were in the cut of Jesus' Son, I don't mean to take you back to hard times.
No.
It's kind of interesting.
No, it is interesting.
It is interesting because, I think of you, and I was saying this to you before when I find it really hard to. I found it really hard to describe what I expect from an Alison Maclean film. When you think an Alison Maclean film, and one of the things is that I do expect to be surprised. There's always a lightness in your work, which I find just irresistible. It's a bit cerebral, and you make me look at the world in a different way. I find it hard to describe. Anyway, we talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
But when you were cutting Jesus' Son, did you consciously know that you were trying to shape a different film from the one that your writer-producers wanted and were paying for? Or?
It wasn't even that, because it all had a happy ending. Like, it went full circle. And by the end, I would say that we made a film together. There was one particular producer who was also the main writer, and it was a very, very personal project for her. I would say more personal than it was for me, actually. Yeah. Because she lost a sister to heroin and, that kind of thing. So it was and she acquired the rights and had a passion to make this book. So we arrived at it together, but part of the problem was that she'd never made a film before. And that's always very, very difficult because, we'd have rough cut screenings before, in the early stages, the first few weeks, once a week. And it was also an unusual film because until all the pieces were sort of in place, it didn't really hold together. Like, it would fall into its parts. You needed the voiceover, you needed some music, you needed things to be the right length, and the balance to be working before it worked. And so then there's just all that fear and panic that it's not going to work and it's not going to be a good film, and especially it's their money at stake and so invested. So we'd have these rough cut screenings where it wasn't quite working and they'd never seen a rough cut before, and so there would just be these like pale, silent faces, and they wouldn't even know what to say, and it would take me 3 days to get over the screening, and then we'd prepare for the next one, so it was like that kind of thing. And then eventually it got to the point where we fired the editor because it was either him or me, and he was the casualty, So then I went away on holiday, and then Elizabeth, came in, and she kind of worked with a new editor, and then I came in, like 3 weeks later. So that's a difficult, position to be in. And then we kind of found the film slowly, painfully, over many, many weeks. And by the end, we were mostly happy with what we had. We agreed on most things. So, yeah, it's always a particular situation. Every film is unique, You can't.
They all feel very different.
They do, don't they?
Yeah.
You think you know what to expect, and it'll be something else.
Something different.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah.
You quite like surprise.
I do like surprises. Yeah. I mean, there's surprises I don't like.
Well, yeah. We'll try not to talk about too many of those today. So just to kind of I'm skipping through. We're doing great big leaps through Alison's work, but one of the other things I think that I love about just the body of work of yours that I've seen is that you also work between fact and fiction. There is a truth fact element in the fiction and vice versa. Yeah. And just thinking about the leap it takes for a fiction maker to work in the world of documentary, and there's some documentarians in the room. So can you talk a little bit about Persons of Interest, that you made that film? Yeah. What propelled you into the place to make the film, and how that was for you? And
I mean, I haven't done it before, and I'd love to do it again. It's a very, very different process, obviously, but it was actually a friend who came to me and had some money and wanted to make some sort of social justice documentaries, and came to me and wanted to do something about the whole situation after 9/11 with immigration and how they detained, a lot of Arab Muslim guys on immigration charges. Well, who had sort of like immigration cases in process, or just there was some kind of question around their status. And so some of them were detained for up to a year or more without sort of due process and without being really charged. You know, they're just held on immigration sort of like violations, that sort of thing. So he wanted to do, there were some of them that were coming out, some of the detainees were coming out, so he wanted to make a film about that. And I actually co-directed it with an ex-boyfriend of mine. We decided to do it together, and we just decided to do it in a different way, and actually partly weirdly inspired by a music video that I made, Natalie Imbruglia video, which is very odd, but it was just a locked camera, just a fixed camera, and then we built a kind of set. And we decided that we're interested in not doing pre-interviews, but actually just seeing them as encounters. So we'd have this camera that was always running for a day and a half, and then we had these people coming in, sometimes alone, sometimes, you know, with a partner or a family, and we would record everything. So it would be the first meeting between us and them, and we'd ask questions. Sometimes they would read letters. Sometimes they would show photographs by coming closer to the camera. The phone calls, you know, one woman brought 3 of her boys, and they tore up the set at some point because she got a phone call from her husband who'd been deported to Jordan, and got a phone call on set as we were filming, you know, and went off to take that, and the boys just kind of tore up the set, you know. So, yeah, so it was sort of an interesting, unusual process where there's just a seat and there was a kind of window that you couldn't see out of, so it functioned as a kind of maybe a cell, maybe a like kind empty
holding
room,
place,
a holding place in a way, yeah. And then I'd ask them to sometimes like reenact things a little bit. So it was a bit of a hybrid. And actually, I mean, obviously, yeah, I was inspired by some of the Iranian movies. I don't know if any of you've seen films like Close Up or you know, Kiarostami's films, or another film that inspired a short that I made called Intolerable, which we could see a little piece of perhaps, but that was also inspired by a film by Kiarostami called, no, sorry, not by him, by another guy, Makhmalbaf, you know, called Salam Cinema, that was about auditions. So it was like a film about auditions and the process between a director and actors, and so that inspired me. So that sort of, my interest in that kind of stemmed from those films and experimenting with that, I suppose.
I think that's a good place to just pause and have a look at the Intolerable clip.
Going in there. What's going on in there, ladies?
Thank you.
Ladies, what's going on in there? 2 girls that walked out like really upset, and this one called.
My apologies.
I know.
Hello.
My apologies.
Hi.
Hi. Hey.
Thanks for coming in.
You're welcome.
Okay, should we not even go in?
Don't tell them.
What the hell's going on?
Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Hi.
On the X, right?
Please. Could you slate for the camera, just so you know?
Okay, Woody King. I'm with Ann Steele Agency.
This is a film about flight, about escape, and your audition is actually your escape from this room, down the hallway, out the exit, and you can't come back.
Okay, flight.
Does something come to mind?
Yeah.
What? Keep it real.
I don't understand the flight down the hallway, but
Once you go down the hall and out the exit, you can't come back. And your job is to really convince your fellow actors in the hallway that you're spontaneously escaping from something. Are you ready?
So it's kind of like an escape from, not necessarily this room, but...
No, not necessarily this room. Maybe something that's happened in this room. Maybe this room isn't even this room.
Okay. I hate you! I can't believe you did this to me!
Okay, here she comes. She's screaming your name. So you just...
Please, I didn't do anything, please.
But you gotta get out of this room. You gotta get down the hallway before she...
Please, Mommy, I didn't do anything, please. Please, I swear. I swear I didn't do anything, please. Please. Please just leave me alone, Mommy, I swear. I swear I didn't do anything, I'm sorry.
Okay, Amanda, now you totally escaped down the hallway. All the way down. No, the real hallway. The actual hallway.
Where did I gave you your picture and resume, right? Yeah. Okay.
It's up to me as to what I'm escaping from.
Everything.
Well, my mother pops into my head immediately. But I could think of something else if that doesn't seem appropriate.
I don't know your mother, so it may well be perfectly
That's the thing
appropriate.
I spent most of my childhood escaping from, so it's my initial thought.
Well, that's... Why don't you work with that?
Okay.
Never again will I do this.
I'm doing that.
You had fun doing that?
Yeah, it was sort of sadistic, but it was wicked. Yeah, I was in the next room watching 3 monitors, so we had 3 hidden cameras, 2 hidden cameras and one camera in the room. Yeah.
How did that idea, I mean, you've talked about being inspired by something, but it wasn't just a inspiration thing. I mean, how did it bubble
was
up?
Strange. Yeah, I seem to do quite well with assignments. Like, it was this agency that every year they do a series of short films directed by commercial directors, and they give you a theme, and it was to promote a Sony high-def camera. So they provide the camera, and then it's paid for by the production company. So the theme was flight, and I was having trouble thinking of something, and then I'd always wanted to do something with auditions, so I thought of the idea of flight as escape. So then we brought, I think, 150 actors in over a day and a half, and all they knew was that it was a short film about flight, and that I was directing it, and that they had to wear blue. That's all they knew. And so that's what happened. So it's all completely unscripted.
And who's David?
David is a really extraordinary person who died 2 years ago of cancer, really sad. He was a good friend, and is a nonfiction essayist writer, a little bit like David Sedaris, a little bit. He was a friend of his, and also an actor, and that was his sort of secret passion, really, to act, and wanted to act more than he did, and so I asked him to be the director, and he was just brilliant at improv. You can if you're interested, you can see this online. It's on Vimeo. It's available, but it's worth watching just for him. He's so
He is extraordinary.
quick and deft, and just works with the people that come in so many different ways. He's brilliant. Yeah.
Over that day and a half, how much sort of toing and froing between you and David happened? Was it?
Not a huge amount. There were a few times when I would speak to him. He had a little earwig in, so I could talk to him, but just now and then. Yeah, not all the time.
Did he do anything naughty? Or did he follow the instructions?
Well, he would surprise me a lot.
Yeah.
You know, like he would just suddenly flip into something like that I wasn't expecting. Like there was one where there's a woman who comes in and she talks about being, you know, cruel to a girl at school and throwing ham at this girl, and she and the other friends were throwing ham at this girl, and then sort of saying things like, you know, who's your friend and stuff like that. Anyway, so then he just suddenly had these little mints and he started throwing mints at her, and then she became the girl that was having ham thrown at her. You know, so just things like that. He's just very quick and very funny.
It's fantastic. I mean, I recommend it for those of you who haven't. How long is it?
It's 30 minutes.
30
actually.
minutes.
It's quite long. So it hasn't shown at many festivals because it's very hard to show a 30-minute film. It was rejected a lot. Yeah.
Shouldn't have been.
Yeah,
They should have made exceptions for it.
It's hard. It's a hard length. Yeah.
Should we sort of skip
Yeah.
to The Professor?
Sure.
Because that's another. Is it called The Professor? Yeah. Is the short story called The Professor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
So that's where we're going to get to the rehearsal. We're nearly there. It's a Lydia Day. You introduced me to Lydia Davis. I felt very ignorant about that, but anyway, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The adaptation of a Lydia Davis short story. So talk a little bit about that, because that's you know, a collaborative relationship between someone else's work and your vision of it. And
I've loved her work for a long time, and she's sort of a master of the short fiction. She's written one novel, and she writes short stories. Sometimes they're 3 sentences, you know, just a tiny little snippet on a page.
They're kind of extraordinary.
They are. She's really unique, and she's very admired and loved, and she's also quite famous as a translator of like Flaubert and Proust and things in States. But you know, it's been one of those. Often I find there's a book when I'm writing a script that I'll carry around that becomes this sort of lucky book that I'm always opening, and that was that book for me. And it's the kind of thing I'll open it just randomly and find some, like she's the opposite of cliche. Like she just kind of like clears your brain of all cliche, you know, because she just is so precise, and she kind of so specific and, you know, unique anyway in her perspective on things. And she sort of represents the thinking mind and the ruminating mind. Anyway, I've loved her for a long time. So
have you met her?
No, we've emailed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you acquired the rights to this story, how was that? You emailed her agent?
I emailed her agent, met her agent. She
Yeah.
was very open. We paid the requisite money, and that was that.
And was she interested in what you were going to do with the story as the adapter?
No, she didn't ask. I think I did send the script, and I believe she didn't look at it.
Right.
Yeah, and
so they were short emails, were they?
Yeah, they were short emails. Yeah, I mean, I only emailed her at the very end just to thank her and send her a link to the film, because I thought she probably hadn't seen it, and you know, she said something about it being such a different animal, you know, film.
It is.
But yeah, so I don't. Who knows what she made of it? But
she may not have watched it.
She might not have watched it. Yeah, it's very possible.
Right. Shall we watch the second clip? Could
Sure.
we play the next clip, please?
A few years ago, I used to tell myself I wanted to marry a cowboy. Why wouldn't I say this to myself? Living alone, excited by the brown landscape, sometimes noticing a cowboy in a pickup truck in my rearview mirror as I drove on the broad highways of the West Coast. In fact, I realize I would still like to marry a cowboy, though by now I'm living in the East and married already to someone who is not a cowboy. I thought if I married a cowboy, I wouldn't have to leave the West. I liked the West for its difficulties. First, I liked the difficulty of telling when one season was over and another had begun. And then I liked the difficulty of finding any beauty in the landscape where I was. I told myself I liked the way cowboys dressed, starting with the hat and how comfortable they were in their clothes. So practical, having to do with their work.
That's interesting because
But what would a cowboy want with a woman like me? An English professor, the daughter of another English professor. Not very easygoing.
Indentations, but then 6 indents in, then you have like the Polish Revolution, and it has the same weight as in the dark times I sang karaoke. The piece is trying to say, in these nested ideas is what thinking looks like.
Yeah. Mm. I mean, because I like the way that you've got it set up now. So
though I was a teacher outside, I was something else inside.
And then you go into personal about like my hobby that I have, and if it's
and why somebody should read the webtoon. And I have a feeling that the answer to that is somewhere in your narrator.
Okay, great, thank you. Comments, anyone?
I looked like a woman in glasses, but I had dreams of leading a very different kind of life. The life of a woman who would not wear glasses. The kind of woman I saw from a distance now and then in a bar. More important than the clothes a cowboy wore and the way he wore them was the fact that a cowboy probably wouldn't know much more than he had to. He would think about his work and about his family, if he had one, and about having a good time, and not much else. I was tired of so much thinking, which was what I did most in those days. I did other things, but I went on thinking while I did them. I might feel something, but I would think about what I was feeling at the same time. I even had to think about what I was thinking and wonder why I was thinking it. When I had the idea of marrying a cowboy, I imagined that maybe a cowboy would help me stop thinking so much. I thought that when my mind, always so busy, always going around in circles, always having an idea and then an idea about an idea, reached out to his mind, it would meet something quieter, that there would be more blanks. That some of what he had in his mind might be the sky, clouds, hilltops, ropes, saddles, horsehair, the smell of horses and cattle, motor oil, calluses, grease, fences, dry stream beds, lame cows, stillborn calves, freak calves, veterinarians' visits, treatments, inoculations. I imagined this even though I knew that some of the things I liked that might be in his mind, like the saddles, the saddle sores, the horsehair, and the horses themselves, weren't often a part of the life of a cowboy anymore. As for what I would do in my life with this cowboy, I sometimes imagined myself oiling tack or helping out in the barn, while the cowboy had both arms inside a cow to turn a calf so it would present properly. Problems and chores like these would be clear, and I would be able to handle them in a clear way. I wouldn't stop reading and thinking, but I wouldn't know very many people who did a lot of that, so I would have more privacy in it.
Darling.
Hey, baby, you hungry?
What'd you think?
Because the cowboy, though so close to me all the time, wouldn't try to understand, but would leave me alone with it.
Ford to claim their $11 million prize this morning in faith.
I love that film. You sort of outed one of my fantasies.
Yeah, I developed a fantasy making it, actually.
I have to ask this question: how many real cowboys are in that?
They're all real cowboys.
They're all real cowboys. Yeah. How did? So, what was the process?
I mean, see, that was another like really charmed thing where I decided to make it. Piggybacked on the end of commercial, used some of the same crew, and then there's a casting person I work with, and he took me to I've forgotten the name of it, but a town just outside of Los Angeles, and said, we'll set up some meetings with some cowboys. And he set it up, so we drove out there, me and the cameraman and Dan, the casting person, and there were 4 cowboys, and 3 of them were hopeless, and one of them was perfect. And it was that guy, the blonde guy, who looks a little bit like Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And he just like opened up his whole world. He just offered himself, his pickup, the ranch he works on, his horses, his grandfather's ranch. I mean, like everything came from that guy. And then there was another woman who's one of the women in the creative writing group, and she brought all of that. So all of her creative writing group and that school, and I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it's just there's the whole world of the film right there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
How long? How did you have a short space of time to shoot it?
Yeah, we did it in 5 days.
Yeah.
But you were running. You know, we were really.
Yeah.
There were a lot of trucks and animals and people. And,
there's a lot of things.
There's a lot of stuff
it's really
in it.
complex. The
Yeah,
film.
it is quite complex.
Yeah. The other thing that is beautiful in it is the soundscape and the music, which you're very clever about, I think. And because it's kind of classic, but there's a little twist in it as well.
Yeah.
And you go from that to the silence, which is just gorgeous. Because you have made music videos. Have you made one any recently?
No, not since.
And you were a bit musical as a child.
Yeah.
Do you like that relationship between music, the language of music in your film? Is that part of the? I mean, you're not there yet. You've got 4 days to go and then a holiday.
Yeah.
But when you work, you know, are you looking forward to working?
Yeah, I'd say that's possibly almost my favorite part of the whole process.
Yeah.
I love sound and music, but it's also very hard. It's hard to find the right music, and it's hard to find music that's affordable, more to the point, you know. So, so I mean, music's going to be hugely important in the rehearsal, but I don't quite know how that's going to work yet, you know, in terms of...
And with this, was that found music, or was that did you have someone come in and score it?
We found tracks that we loved, you know, the editor and I, and then, of course, we couldn't afford it.
Them, yeah.
So we paid for the handle, and then everything else. And then I worked with a composer that was actually a young composer that had worked on Jesus' Son, and he came in and he kind of did an amazing job for not much money and recreated a lot of new music for it. So he did a great job.
Is that available on Vimeo?
Yes.
There you go.
Yes.
A treat
Easy
in store.
to find, yeah.
Okay, we've got to the rehearsal. So, so we all know it first as a book. So we might as well kind of start at that. When did you read it? What happened? How did the book come to you?
Yeah, it came in an interesting way. I've been looking to make a film back here for a long time, and had, you know, it's difficult living the other side of the world to find material, and thinking I wanted to work with a writer and wanting to work with Bridget again. And I was actually at an artist colony called Yaddo, and a young writer there was up for a prize with Eleanor and was in Wales with her, and came back and said, oh, there's a writer, do you know Eleanor Catton? And I hadn't heard of her, and he said, she's got the same bio as you. She was born in Canada, moved to Christchurch, and then moved to the States, which was surprising. And she said, you know, he'd love the book, and he said, you should read it. So I read it very quickly, and then I, you know, emailed Bridget, and she read it very quickly. And, you know, it just sort of seemed like a sort of perfect book, actually.
Why?
Because there are a lot of preoccupations of mine to do with performance, to do with, you know, coming out of Intolerable, so much to do with sort of, you know, actors being actors, acting, kind of illusion and truth, and, you know, that kind of area, and quite female, and a lot about, you know, a sort of heightened world in a way, you know.
And
so
sort of self-contained.
Self-contained and sort of achievable. And so then I had already met Emily Perkins because I'd loved her books, and shortly after I read a novel about my wife, which I loved and really recommend. It's a fantastic novel. I met her on one of my trips here and said, I'd love to work with you sometime, and then this just sort of seemed like a perfect coming together of, she just seemed like a perfect match. And so we started working, and we worked on it for, I guess it was 2.5, 3 years, I've forgotten now, but a long time, and it was a very, it was a great collaboration, long distance. It really worked so well, and we would get together. We probably got together maybe 3 times in that process, and the rest of the time we were working on Skype and sending things back and forth, and it was very harmonious and very complimentary. It was great.
And did you, does Eleanor, has she gone, invite me to the premiere, or has she been she's kind of there a little bit, or because that's hard, isn't it?
It's very hard, and I've been burnt a few times. Like Dennis Johnson tried to take the rights away just before we shot Jesus' Son. I've had situations like that, a couple that have been really hairy and scary, and just to the extent of thinking I'm not sure that I ever want to adapt a book again. So I was nervous, but she sort of gave us her blessing, and we met, and then she left us alone, and then she was busy writing another big book. And then, at the end of it, when we had a script, we sent it to her, and I was really quite nervous about how she would respond, but she was remarkably open. I was amazed, actually. She just was able to see it as a different thing, because we changed it hugely. The sort of, perhaps the primary image in the book is a saxophone teacher and girls that play the sax, and we turned that to girls that play tennis, and that saxophone teacher has become something else quite different. So we changed it hugely, and she was very open and wrote a long email and said, was excited, and didn't have many notes. So, couldn't have been better,
That's
as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And so it'd be nice just to talk a little bit about the production. Because you've also, you said to me before that you feel like you're at your most collaborative, that you have been beautifully surprised.
Yeah.
You've got a sort of romantic glint in your eye about the process, which is just gorgeous to see.
Yeah.
So do you just want to talk a little bit about how that's been? You've worked with 15 young actors.
Yeah.
And teachers, and
Yeah, it was just everything kind of aligned. I think we chose everyone very carefully, and it was a nice combination of coming back to working with, Bridget and Trevor, so there's that comfort in that, and Carrie Fox, who, was a friend, and then at the same time, being absent from here for so long, like choosing the crew very, very carefully, and then also just discovering a lot of young actors that I didn't know. So apart from Carrie, and I knew Alice Englert, a little bit through Jane, who just walked in. And apart from them, everyone else was sort of new to me. So worked with brilliant casting directors in Wellington called Tina Cleary and Miranda Rivers, who just did this very wide search and were just so committed and so passionate about it, and just brought so many great people to me, and it's just been so exciting to just to see what these young actors bring. It's really kind of gone. They've just exceeded my expectations. Every day. It's been really exciting. So.
How was rehearsal?
Right. Well, I was saying before that the rehearsal process was probably the part of it that I was most nervous about, actually. And we had 2 weeks, and it was very concentrated. And we had 1 week with James Ralston, who's the lead, and this other young girl, Ella, who plays Isolde, and mainly with them. And then the second week was all the 15 who were the group of first years, plus the teachers. And I was very lucky to work with Rachel House, who some of you probably know, who's just been a joy and has brought so much. It's just been so invaluable in the sense of her her experience and also her long relationship with James and just her generosity. And so we kind of designed the second week of the rehearsal together. And it sort of really worked out beautifully because we did a lot of theater games. We had almost like a little kind of boot camp, sort of a drama school boot camp. I mean, there was such a range of experience from people who'd been to drama school, people who'd never acted before, people who'd done film but hadn't done much theater. And so just they're coming from such different places and very different kinds of people, personalities. So we had 3 days of that sort of like games and improv and trust exercises, and then we had the people, Miranda Harcourt and Cohen Holloway, who were playing the teachers. They came in and they led classes, and then Carrie came in. I was saying to Philippa, she came in character as this, slightly scary drama teacher, and so we all met her for the first time in character, and that was something that I'd never done before. We're all slightly terrified of her. Rachel and I were too scared to speak to her.
She would have loved it.
Yeah, I think she had a ball, and we spent, several hours, so she really kind of, it helped her to find the character, I think, just doing it with the kids and leading them in she worked with them on scenes from Betrayal and worked with them in pairs, and that was really great. And so I felt at the end of that week, that second week, that they were so, they had so much trust and intimacy, and just this lovely kind of, sense of intimacy that somehow we created in less than a week. It was quite amazing. And so then it was always there. It was just so available. Like every time we did a scene, they were all there, and they just like held the space, and they were just reacting as a group that had been together for a year. It was quite remarkable.
You called yourself a collector, which I thought was an interesting way to view the work you do.
Yeah,
collecting things, collecting people and collecting ideas and.
Yeah, I mean that's a bit of a cold way to put it, but I guess I meant in the sense that I keep a notebook and I just write things down, and I just notice things that happen. So many things that happened in prep, found their way into the film in a way that I never would have, imagined, or just little things that I noticed the actors do. I was saying that, that James, he whistles, for example, and it's just such a beautiful thing, and not many people whistle, and my dad used to whistle all the time in just this lovely unconscious way all the time. And so it reminded me of him, and I just would think, well, there's got to be a scene where he can whistle, so I'd be thinking of like, where's a place that I could put that, and so I find myself doing that a lot.
I don't think that's cold. I think that's just being spontaneous.
Yeah,
it's being in the world.
Yeah, I mean, and there, I mean, to a degree that's never happened before, like something that happens on Saturday night, ends up in the film on Wednesday, that kind of thing. So sometimes people get a bit annoyed because it creates extra work, and it's like new ideas that need to be sort of like rewritten into the script, or things have to, change to accommodate them. But I find it exciting, and it just keeps it alive. It keeps it.
And the world gets richer.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the layers of working at Unitech, and just the changes that place is going through, and the fact that those buildings are probably going to go fairly soon, and just that. The campus and those trees and just the history of that place. I mean, all those things have just sort of organically found their way into the story. So, okay. Yeah.
Question. Sorry, we're running out of time, but hi.
I was wondering why you used a writer to adapt the book rather than a screenwriter.
Oh, yeah. Well, we did it together. It was very, very much the two of us, and I felt that Emily had the right sensibility. And I've loved her novels and her short stories, and it was just that. It just felt that we would tonally, find the world of the film together, and that we would be complementary, and we were actually. I mean, she had the strengths of a novelist in that she was very, very attuned to character and very, just psychologically rich, stuff that she would come up with, but also very, very, very long, and didn't know how to structure for a screenplay. So then that was a kind of a learning process for her. And so I'd say that, in the back and forth of it all, that we complemented each other well, and we sort of arrived at a place where I felt that we had the same film in our head. And
Emily did go to drama school.
Yeah, that's
and was
right.
an actor.
That's right. Yeah.
She left school
Yeah.
at 15 and went and
That's
acted
right.
in a television series, and then went to drama school. So, you know,
Yeah,
she's lived the dream,
Yeah.
hasn't she?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I was
So
feeling about
she's-
that part. That was also definitely an important part of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it kind of a process of her writing dialogue and you both writing dialogue, or how that's actual words on paper?
Yeah, I mean, what tended to happen, what happened is that we met and we talked and notes and sharing ideas and back and forth, and then she went away and she wrote a first draft, and she wrote a very long first draft. I mean, I was trying to think, it was probably 150 or 160 pages or something. So it was very long, but I was very, you know, happy, you know, happier than I've been getting a first draft in the past, just because there was so much great stuff in there. And then, yeah, and then, so then I would tend to do a lot of rewriting and then a lot of talking. There's just, you know, just a lot of back and forth. And she would sometimes disappear because she was teaching and also finishing a novel herself. So sometimes I would take it over for a while and then she'd come back in, and sometimes we'd send scenes back and forth. So it just kept evolving. But it was just actually a pretty happy process, which, you know, more so than some other collaborations that I've had. So.
Any other questions? Yes.
Hi.
Hi. Tina.
Oh, you're looking at this, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, Tina, you're here.
No, we're looking at you. We're looking at you.
Hello.
How long was that process with you and Emily? I'm just like,
Yeah.
about how long?
I think it was like 2.5, nearly 3 by the time we were shooting.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably more like 3. Yeah. Surprised to see you there.
And there was someone.
Yeah.
Hi, Fiona.
Hi.
Hi.
During the rehearsals for the rehearsal,
Mm.
were your actors doing their drama games in character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, always in character. And always, you know, working with them to find it and doing like little presentations or offering things in character and to trying to find, you know, create little relationships between them, friendships or things, or we did a fun thing, this was Rachel's idea, not my idea, of like they all lined up in a row in their own perceived status in the group at the beginning of the year, and then we did that 3 times and we took a photograph and it was quite funny. Like I think James was second to the bottom. Yeah, I mean there's just like the way they perceive, you know,
How it went.
yeah, how it went.
It's creating a world, isn't it?
It is creating a world. I mean, I learned so much from that process. You know, just anything that brings it to life, and that it becomes a lived experience as opposed to just an idea. Yeah.
Well, look, thank you very much. I think this is a quote from Alison, which I really like.
Oh yeah.
It feels to me like it relates to the provocation of what collaboration might be, and you talked about a working process as an open-ended invitation, which I think is a really beautiful, quite sort of resonant, floaty kind of phrase. So thank you for that, and thank you for a really interesting afternoon.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alison. We can go till 4.
Oh. 10 more minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talked about how you're working projects that are about charm.
Mm.
With the other one, and you've also talked quite fondly about sort of the cast and crew that you've worked with, with ones that weren't so charmed, what was the, you know, like, what drove you to keep going, I guess, and to keep forcing them to
Yeah, I mean you do what you can, and you keep trying to find connection and that kind of thing. I mean, it's just, I guess, it hasn't worked so well when people, you know, perhaps people haven't been chosen perhaps quite so carefully, or, you know, or sometimes having people who are not kind of perhaps so invested, you know, like it's a job perhaps a bit more than it's that specific project. And I always think that sometimes can backfire. Because it's a bit impersonal in a way, but you know, you just do your best, don't you? With the team that you have and try and inspire people if you can. But sometimes, there are times where I've just felt the pressure so much that I haven't been the person that's inspiring, or, I can get into my own little box of anxiety or at times. So, it's just lovely to feel that you're not in that place, that you are actually coming from a kind of very reciprocal, it's just mutually sort of supportive and everyone wanting the best from each other, that it's really lovely when you can be in that place and create it. Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah. One of the other, you talked about not having a producer in the States that was your person.
Yeah.
But have you got other, crew that you return to that you keep using?
Yeah, in commercials, because that's been a lot of the work that I've done in the last few years. So, yeah, very much so. Then there is actually a bit of a team that I go back to over and over and over. Yeah, and I enjoy that. Yeah, it's important.
Have you noticed any differences in filming here now from when you were last here?
Yeah, I mean it's a much more mature, industry, and it's deeper. Obviously, there's this level of experience and people here who've worked on such a range of productions, and I mean high caliber. I mean, it goes without saying, but I mean, I'd say that this is, perhaps the best crew that I've ever worked with. It's just, I just love them. They're just so good, so competent, so generous, and just caring, and I've just loved the experience. So, yeah.
I think
really happy.
I think part of that is also it's fantastic for us as a community to have you come back.
Yeah,
that's really exciting.
That's nice. Yeah, it's nice. Feels good.
Yep.
I apologise because this is slightly off topic, but I'm really interested in the fact that you have mixed a commercials career with a filmmaking career, and there's not that many people who do that. And I find it really interesting because that's what I do. But I just wondered if you could sort of talk about whether you see those as related at all or as completely separate mediums.
No, they're definitely not separate. I mean, they're definitely related. You're still directing, and I mean, it's not always been through choice. Sometimes it's just been that I've had my own projects. I'm going to have a couple of projects in the States that I have tried to get up or tried to get made over years and years and years and years, and just at some point you have to keep working as a director, and I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for that work because I'm just working with actors. I work with different DPs. I have good experiences and I enjoy it, and it subsidizes all the other work I do that doesn't pay. So, I definitely see them as related. It is funny to go from, it was a bit sort of shocking in a way to go from the 30-second world to the 90-minute world. It's so different, just a sense of pacing. This is it just took a bit of, just recalibrating my brain or something. Yeah, it's very different.
What do you find in the going between?
Different situation because I'm a producer and a director.
Oh, okay.
I think that there is some relationship. I find it really symbiotic, partly because of collaboration, actually, having a team. But it is a very different storytelling medium, and there's a whole lot of different pressures. But I do think it's sort of related. But there's not that many people who do it. It's sort of seen here very, very separately. Which I think is interesting.
Is there someone? Yep.
Can I just ask you a little bit about adaptation and interpretation, just in terms of, because you quite often start with a book or something. I think your Jesus the Son of film captures the real scuzziness and the poetry of the original kind of book. I think it's a really fantastic adaptation of the book. At what point do you kind of leave that source text behind the work, and when does it become a completely new thing, or would you refer back to the book?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I would say that book was adapted by, 3 people, not me. I mean, I was involved, but I didn't write it myself. And they were very, 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 very in love with the book and very attached to the book, and would just want to use every bit of it they could, And so that was actually a little bit of a process of like almost being hobbled by faithfulness in a way, of just trying too hard to be the book, and then at some point you have to kind of take the leap. And I would say this was the opposite to that. The rehearsal was the opposite in the sense that I read the book twice and then marked some things and then put it away for 2 years, you know, and actually just invented. And then there were just certain scenes that were quite close, but we were very, very free with our adaptation. So, you know, very different actually. But in a way, you know, I think it would have been difficult to, for example, come up with an original script, say with Emily or anyone else, you know, long distance, that you sort of need that source of some kind that gives you a kind of, you know, it's a core, it's a tone, it's a kind of world, some characters to get you going, you know, if you're not in the same country. So, yeah. Yep.
This is going back a little bit, but I was hoping you could talk a little bit about your Emily video.
Go for it.
Collaborative process at all, or did you go straight to her with the idea exclusively, or?
They came to me strangely, not that I knew her, but the producer knew my work, and so I was offered it, and then had the idea of just like being on a film set and watching a monitor and just watching all the comings and goings and all the in-between moments when you're not filming, and just thinking, oh, that could be fun. And then took the idea to her, and she, you know, she loved the idea. And so then that was just, yeah, that just was something that just became this odd thing that just, you know, emerged on that day with us spontaneously doing stuff, you know, in front of a fixed camera. So it was quite creative and quite free. Yeah.
You made more than one?
Yeah, I made 3 with her, and the first one went really well, and then the third one was a total disaster. Just like in every way. Yeah. Like, you know, beyond, like the production company went bankrupt, they remade it with a different director, they weren't happy, they changed the editor, you know, like everything that could go wrong went wrong. Yeah.
Is that what exists?
Maybe. I don't, possibly not.
In another universe.
Yeah.
One last question. Yeah.
I've already asked a question, so if anybody else has got one.
Go for it, Fiona.
Okay, I'm just interested in Jesus' Son, because I love it. I think it's a terrific movie. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the fact that there were difficulties, and some quite big difficulties. And considering this whole, you know, collaboration theme, do you think there's anything you did, either consciously or unconsciously, that helped rescue that collaboration? Because I don't know, you know, to have the experience of a difficult, fraught collaboration resulting in a successful film, that's kind of heartening that can happen, because those collaborations that fall apart sometimes. So
Yeah.
do you think there's anything that you did?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't obviously just me, but I was just saying that there was a primary relationship that, you know, with the producer and me, she was also the writer, and she was in the editing room with me all the time, and that was the primary relationship. So I would say that it took all of our sort of, you know, our kind of determination in a way to come through it and to keep talking and to try and be honest with each other and to, I mean, she's a Buddhist, and, you know, we really, really worked, I would say, together through some very difficult, I mean, like by the end of it, we were hardly, well, we were talking a bit more, but there were times we were hardly talking. I mean, it was just like we went through battle together. But now when we see each other on the street, we just like hug each other and don't let go. And we don't ever have dinner together or anything like that. But when we run into each other, it's just like, it's this, yeah, we just went through this huge thing together. And there's a lot of love, you know, so I would just say just to keep talking, to try and just process and, yeah, just try and be as generous as you can be and get through it, yeah.
Was there something in the way that was set up that led to the difficulty, like in terms of the way you were brought in and not knowing that someone else was, I don't know,
No, but it's not like it's not perhaps the way it sounds. It's not like a studio situation or anything. It's really just the combination of, the fact that it was their personal money, and that is at risk. The stakes are really high, and it's a marriage, and it's also not having made a film before. There's certain things like that really make it hard, And those are things you can't really, I guess, you don't necessarily see going in, or you wouldn't necessarily say, I won't do this project because of that, And also being a very ambitious film, trying to do it with not enough money. But I mean, look, that happens so many, it's just like every film, so why even say it in a way?
But it does, I mean, what you're kind of evoking is something really complex and difficult and hard work, but also people drawing on the best of themselves.
Yeah.
In the end. In the service of something that you shared.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's about the work. It's not actually personal in the end. It's actually about what you're trying to create together and wanting it to be as good as it can be. And so if you share that goal, then I think that actually will carry you through most things. I hope. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
4 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alison.
Thanks.